Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I just read Xenos by Abnett and it was pretty cool, but also a little bit overrated to be honest. The premise is as follows. Gregor Eisenhorn is an Imperial Inquisitor and he has been chasing a certain criminal for years now. The book starts off with Eisenhorn following him to the frosty world of Hubris. Pretty soon, however, it turns out that this crook was only a gear in a much bigger machine, and thus Eisenhorn and pals go on an action-packed adventure across multiple planets, hoping to stop this big conspiracy and to prevent the bad guys from acquiring the MacGuffin. Now the best thing about this novel by far is the superb world building, somewhat reminiscent to me of the Malice Darkblade books. Abnett has worked out the planets and inquisitorial system in extreme detail. He has created a special language that Eisenhorn and his retinue speak known as Glossia, which is really fun because while it isn't really English, you can still somewhat deduce what it means. Through a series of explanations by the protagonist and a couple of cleverly written political discussions, we learn a lot about the inner workings of the Inquisition and its relationship with the Imperium. And additionally, every planet they land on is filled with little details and quirks that make them very interesting and also quite immersive. If Black Library ever needs a guy to come up with some cool planets, I know who I would vote for. The Eisenhorn trilogy is often the most recommended book series for beginners, and I can definitely see why. The story is action-packed, fast-paced, and just fun. There are no big tragedies or overly dark and horrific scenes. This book lets the reader touch their toes into the darkness of 40k without overwhelming them. On top of this, the excellent world building also makes it so that this novel still works as a self-contained book. You don't need to know much, if anything, about the setting in order to understand it. So yes, I do agree with the verdict that this is a good beginner book. However, you probably have heard all the praise a million times already, so let's instead look at some of the things this book does less well. One thing I'd expected more of were the characters. Gregor Eisenhorn himself is very much a straightforward Inquisitor, not really a Victor Saltzpyre level zealot who kills every psyker on sight, but also not a Dr. House type of character who's willing to bend the rules a bit to complete the objective. And well, that's it. There really isn't much more we learn about him. He's an okay protagonist, but for a novel with this much hype about it, I expected a bit more. That being said, I do have to admit he does have some really badass quotes. Oh, and side note, as of recording, I've also finished the other Eisenhorn books, and well, he goes through quite some character development in those, so in hindsight it actually makes a lot of sense for him to be such a Puritan in this book, and you'll just have to read the other ones to figure out why. Eisenhorn is then followed by a retinue of characters that also didn't have too much special about him. Imels is pretty fun and he's a heavily augmented guy with a pathological obsession for gathering knowledge. Midas is basically a soldier with special flight skills, and Fishig is quite literally just a grumpy soldier. In fact, I'd say the most interesting character by far is Bekin. Bekin is a psychic blank that joins our gang along the way, and she goes through quite a lot in this novel, ranging from the fact that she's a civilian caught in all sorts of warfare and madness that no normal Imperial citizen would ever even be aware of, to the fact that she has to deal with being a psychic pariah and the massive impact that this has and always will have on our life. The novel doesn't really explore this, unfortunately. Sure, it will make some one-sentence remarks about how massive of an impact this has on her, but we don't really get to see any of it. Same goes for her character development, which is mentioned a couple times, but rarely really shown or explored. The book treats her a bit like an on-demand solution to all your warp-related problems, which I think is a bit of a wasted opportunity. The same also holds true for the villains, about whom we don't really learn anything, except that they are the big bad guys working for an evil scheme. I mean, it's not on the level of mustache twirlers, but it gets pretty close. Furthermore, people keep telling me that this is a cool mystery novel. Well, in fact, it really isn't one. The story of Xenos is very straightforward. They see a bad guy does something, one or more of the bad guys gets away, Inquisition gives chase. This then repeats a couple times over multiple planets, but never are there any clues that invite the reader to think about the mystery. Xenos is a fun action-adventure novel, but a mystery it most certainly is not. My final point of criticism is the ending, or rather the lack of one. The book doesn't really resolve much and kind of just stops. This is then followed by a short paragraph where we see the surviving protagonist getting ready for the sequel. Xenos feels much more like the pilot episode than the first season, so I'm rather curious to see where all of this goes during the sequel. All in all, Xenos gets 4 to 5 Victor Saltzpyres. Xenos is a fun, action-packed adventure story with excellent world building, and if you want to see some cool alien planets or learn something about the Inquisition, then this definitely is the book for you. Its standalone nature also makes it a great book for beginners. That being said, the characters are a bit lacking in this one and the ending also could use some improvement, but the story does continue quite nicely into the second book and the characters make a lot more sense and get expanded upon a lot in the other 2 books, so it's not that much of a deal. Anyways, that's all I got for you today. Have a nice evening, the book's linked down below, and don't forget your nightly prayers to Nagash.